Fire me before I quit. I ruin your life. Since I'm still in school, I took a job at a bakery of types which I won't name. The place has bread in the name but also sells overpriced salads and sandwiches. I worked there for close to a year, where I had this boss named Betty, not her real name of course. Betty and I didn't get along whatsoever. She had gotten the previous general manager to quit because she had an affair with him, and she threatened to tell his wife if he didn't leave. He quickly left the job and she was promoted to the position. I didn't like her, but I have to respect the dedication to be the general manager of a smaller store. When I first started working there, I was respectful, but she would do things that would get on my nerves. For instance, I would clean all the places I would be hired to do, and once I was done and relaxed for maybe 5 minutes, she would run out of the manager's office screeching, "Why aren't you working?" I would tell her of course I did my job, and as a cashier, if nobody is there to help, then I didn't have anything to do. She would glare at me, then I would see her accidentally drop an entire pot of brewed coffee onto my freshly mopped floor for me to clean. So I learned quickly to always look busy. Once she realized I was going to kneel and kiss the ground she walked on, she started dropping my hours. The store ran on a Game of Thrones type politics for who got promotions and raises. Somehow all her friends were managers and would bully the rest of us. She was barely at work. She would drive to my job clock just in case corporate decided to check her hours. So she was essentially stealing hours. When you clocked in, it printed out a small piece of paper telling when you clocked in. She would just drop them on the floor for me to clean up. I would usually pick them up and stick them into a pocket. So this led to me finding Betty clock in and out stubs in my pocket at my house. This will be important for later. Did I mention she was super racist? She was white and the most of the staff were my fellow high school peers, who were all mostly Puk. One day at work she walked out and told us, "When you're on the clock I own you." When we all reacted to look at her, she backpedaled, and was like, "I didn't mean it like that. This will be important for later." So after a while I got sick of practically begging for hours, so I went to my current job. But decided I merely wanted to drop my hours, which were already barely a day a week. But suddenly when I got my new job, she scheduled me every single day of an entire week. She never did that even when we were on semi-good terms. So I obviously told her I had a new job and couldn't do this. After that I went home and called my friend who was still working there to tell him I was going to quit tomorrow. He has a bad habit of putting his phone on speaker when he's cleaning at work. So Betty overheard this obviously. The next day I walk in and go through the respectful motions of saying, "Thank you for the opportunity" and blah blah blah. Betty let me get through the entire speech before she said, "Oh yeah, I was meaning to tell you. You're fired." I was so blindsided and pissed I cussed her out. My mom raised me to treat women with respect, but this ducking fat overweight hippo looking bish pissed me TF off. She's the type of girl to think being eating was a personality trait. So I left and was mad about being fired before I could quit, but didn't push the issue. I'm only 18 and I already had another job. I wasn't expecting Betty to give me a good reference anyway. I would have completely left it alone if it wasn't for the district manager Ben, not real name, texting me. The revenge. He thought I was still working there, so I explained to him I was fired. He was stunned due to the fact that I was a decent employee. He asked why she let me go and I explained it to him and he was angry. He clarified that she fired me before I quit and I said yes. He was pissed that she did this and asked if there was anything else she might have done. I kind of just vented to him for a bit. When I told him about the racist remark, he asked if anyone else would collaborate with me. I forgot to mention that she slowly fired and effed people to quit and replaced them with her friends and family. Which according to company policy she couldn't do. Something about conflict of interest. I asked all the people who were working that day if they could, and a few said they would say they did. But one did even better. My one co-worker Andy is convinced he's the next big vlogger, so he always has his phone out or just using audio recording for hours for a chance to catch a funny clip. I've watched his content, and let me say it's just super cringe. But turns out he labels each recording by the day and times. So when he checked, he found her making racist remarks. I got a brilliant idea, and with my other fired or co-workers effed to quit, we decided to scour Andy's recordings. We found some great moments of Betty saying controversial things or just being nasty. Like once a guest sneezed on the baked pastries, and when a co-worker told her, she laughed it off and said nobody would know. But this wasn't enough for me. I try to avoid conflict, but when I'm in a situation I'll follow it through. I looked her up on Facebook and found out she was married. Nobody knew this, so when she had the affair with the other manager and basically blackmailed him, she was also married and cheating. I don't think anyone ever cared enough to find out because she was a nasty old lady. So I found the old manager's Mark Facebook and found out he and his wife were separated. Turns out even after he quit, Betty was still trying to blackmail money out of him. When he didn't, she told his wife anyway, causing his wife to divorce him and basically leave him to go back to live with his parents. I did some research, and in my state blackmail or extortion is a third-degree penalty, which has a max of 7 years in prison with a fine over $10,000 to the victim. So I told the old manager what my plan was for her. He agreed to call the cops on her, but I asked if he'd wait until I finished my part first. He said he'd give me a week. So I met with District Manager Ben and showed him all our evidence. The recordings and the written statements from my other ex-co-workers and people who were still working there. I also gave Ben the slips of paper when Betty clocked in and then left and returned 8-10 hours later to clock out. Ben thanked me for the information and then I left. A few days later, while walking past the store, I noticed it was closed in the middle of the day. I texted a guy who still worked there and he told me everything. Turns out Ben first checked the security cameras to see if she was there for the full time she claimed to be. Big surprise, she wasn't. So Ben decided to investigate the store's expenses, since if she's lying about her time, what else could she be stealing? He found out she was stealing money from the store. The guy didn't fully explain how she was, but just that she was. Turns out she was breaking a lot of health and safety codes and used the money for repairs and etc. for herself. So she was fired immediately along with all of her minions, and that left barely anybody to run the store. They shut down to clean up the store and fix things she didn't make. So she's out of a job, and Mark told her husband with photo proof granny nudes EU that she cheated on him. But Mark phrased it so it seemed like she still was. So Betty's husband flips out and decides to divorce her, and Betty is the type to post everything on Facebook. So she's begging someone to let her stay, but all of her friends and family totally bailed on her. So she was living in her car looking for a job. That's when Mark decides to sue her for extortion, so she scrambles to find a lawyer, and to make it even worse, the company decided to sue her for all the money she stole and plus all the repairs and lost revenue while the store is closed. Betty's life is poop. She had to sell her car for drastically under what it's worth to pay for all the legal trouble. Mark told me bits and pieces of her crying in the courtroom, but not too much. I was never super close with him. Last I heard of Betty's, she was living with her sister who definitely hates her. To think she would have avoided all of this if she just let me quit. Edit, I'd just like to answer a few questions most people have had about the validity of the story. First off, I didn't have a good relationship with Betty, so there would be no reason I would ever look her up online. Besides, I don't even have Facebook, so I had to actually look her name up to find it. Next is my friend accidentally recording her racist remarks. Don't most of you know that one friend who is sure they're going to be famous or is obsessed with their online image? He's like that, and it gets annoying when he thinks every moment is a photo opportunity. Next is the timeline. Not all of this occurred as quickly as I stated. I had to cut some parts out for the sake of the story. You wouldn't want to read basically a filler arc in a Reddit story, right? Redditors' reactions. Redditor 1, I'm guessing Panera Bread was the store. If so, this story is definitely believable. I've known many people that have worked at a Panera, and the experience is terrible. Redditor 2, Jesus Christ, this is one hell of a story. Are any bits exaggerated? I find some of it a bit hard to believe, but otherwise good on you for standing up for yourself. Redditor follow-up, the only part that stands out is that he conveniently has a co-worker who's constantly recording and for some reason actually saves it all. That seemed a little too convenient. But it actually wasn't even important to the overall revenge since she got in trouble for other stuff, so if he did make that part up he didn't even need to. Redditor 3, I don't know if this is just me, but this is definitely more than pro-revenge but less than nuclear. Maybe there's no subreddit for that. Redditor follow-up, I dunno, I'd consider this nuclear. Betty is obviously APS but was made to pay. Her entire life fell apart around her, her criminal history, money laundering, fraud, extortion etc. makes her unhireable, she's homeless, divorced, no car, estranged from family. It is likely she will live rough for a long time now. Redditor 4, I have a real hard time believing this one. Redditor follow-up, yep, it's all a bit too perfect. By how she's described, I can't imagine this boss would allow someone to film absolute everything that happens in store. Redditor 5, I dunno about the racism, I've had managers say stuff like that, and they totally mean just the employees in general have to do whatever they want. Shitty, but not necessarily racist. Especially because she tried to backpedal. Redditor follow-up, I agree. Shitty thing to say, not necessarily racist, especially if she backpedaled. The more likely scenario is that she said I own you, then soon after saying that she realized it could be taken as a racist statement, then backpedaled.